There was plenty of times when cash flow was really tight for me that I was using personal credit cards left and right because I had no other option.
Yes.
Now that we can look at things and we can say, this is our cash flow statement. We're expecting this much money to come in. This is what's going out. So we know, okay, great. Cash flow has gotten a lot better. And again, you just make decisions that will affect that.
Welcome to the Roots of Success, the premier landscapers podcast that brings you the latest tips and strategies for successful landscape business. I'm Jim Callai, one of the principals and coaches of McFarland Stanford. Jason New and I started McFarland Stanford to coach landscape businesses after years in the industry ourselves. Now, more than 10 years since we began, McFarland has a deep bench of coaches and subject matter experts who work with our clients on very specific issues of business. Whether you're struggling with people, profits, or just day-to-day challenges, our coaches and guests have the real-world experience and practical advice to help you build a thriving and profitable landscape business.
Hello, listeners. Welcome to another Roots of Success podcast. My name is Ian Hanemann, and I'll be your guest host today. I'm a financial analyst with McFarland Stanford. I've been presenting the financial reports for over a year, and I'm involved, of course, as y'all know, collecting the financial data, presenting it to the ACE peer groups, all of our ACE peer groups. And I'm pleased to welcome Noe Loarca to our podcast today. Noe is an ACE peer group member. He is a landscape business owner in the Arlington, Virginia, Washington, D.C. area. And I also work personally with him for over a year on his accounting team. So I do all of Noe's bookkeeping. I handle his books. And I'm pleased to welcome Noe to the podcast. And Noe, before we dive into your numbers, before we dive into the specifics of your financial data, I'd love for you to give a background on your business and how long you've been involved with ACE and when you founded the business and whatnot.
Yeah, no, thanks, Ian. I'm honored to be here today. So Advanced Landscaping is going on just a little bit over 13 years. We are, as you mentioned, in Arlington, Virginia. The example that I always give to everybody, we're stone's throw from the Pentagon. From our office to the Pentagon, driving maybe takes 2 minutes.
Wow.
So yeah, no, it's really close. And we are in that DC market. We're split between residential and commercial. We are growing and specifically focusing on the commercial aspect, or I guess division. And a lot of our customers are our niche or homeowner associations and condominium associations.
That's great to hear. And Noe, before we get into the specifics, what percentage would you say is, I know we are very heavy maintenance, snow heavy, especially with the February we just had, so no doubt.
It's funny. So we are probably about 60% maintenance. And this year we're hoping to grow that to 70% maintenance. One of the things that throws me off is we did snow removal for all of our customers, the commercial customers. And this year, just when we looked at what we were bringing in for snow, we go, maybe we're not a small snow operation anymore. And so it's funny when you're able to look at things, and I know we'll talk about that, but when you look at what brings in revenue and you go, okay, maybe that is one of our focuses, and it opens up. So yeah, no, we do that. And again, snow can be hit or miss, especially right here in DC.
No, and we saw that over 2025 compared to 2026, and I'm so excited to get into that later with you. And before we get into the specifics of your financial data and the clarity you have now, early years running the business, how were financials managed at first? Just starting your landscape company, because I will say, as a landscape owner, you don't get into landscaping to run financials. You don't get into it to pay taxes or stay on top of that. I'd love to hear how beginning of your business was for you.
Yeah, it's funny you asked, how was it managed? It wasn't. I would look in the bank account and be like, okay, great. Can I buy this mower? Or I'd look in and be like, okay, when is money coming in? And there was a lot of it that wasn't managed at all. Probably the extent of it used to be, I would go to my accountant at the end of the year and say, okay, great. I owe this much in taxes. Awesome. So we didn't have a plan, and I could try to forecast in terms of, I think next year we're going to make this much. And I would have no idea. I had no idea if we were making money. It was gut feeling for everything that we did. Yes. And now, yeah, it's changed, and I'm excited to talk about that.
Exactly. And Noe, when was the point, I feel like, where was the point where you realized you needed better data and you couldn't just glance at the bank account, knew you had enough to run payroll, you had enough to cover expenses? Where was the point in the 13 years where you were like, I need to have better clarity on my finances?
It's funny. I probably could have said from day one, but no, you don't know what you don't know. And yes. One of the things is, and you mentioned the peer group, So it's now we're going on our second year of being in the peer group, literally finishing up 2 years of it. That's awesome. And
Excellent.
going in, seeing people that are in the same position that you are, but also seeing what they know that you don't know and getting that information from them, for me, has been critical. We go in and everybody goes, okay, who's on QuickBooks? And I go, I think my accountant's on QuickBooks, right? And then they go, great. What was your net profit for this? And I go, I think it was this. And it's because the fact that I had none of that information, I couldn't pull it I didn't have it at my fingertips. That right there to me just said a lot. And so I said, okay, there has to be some changes. And again, just being able to see where people are able to pull out information, being able to see what I thought. So one of the biggest things for me was I thought I didn't understand it. People talk about P&Ls and balance sheets and cash flow statements. I truthfully thought I didn't understand it. I was like, man, I guess I should have paid attention better in accounting, right? And in college. And no, that wasn't it. It's a matter of I didn't have the information. How did it relate to what I was doing? And once I started seeing other folks comparing what gross profit and with this above the line is what directly affects the job, and you're like, oh man, that does make a lot of sense. But I don't have those numbers. How am I supposed to know if we're doing a good job or not? And we had no metrics we could go off.
No, that quote you just said, you don't know what you don't know. Not having that financial data going into that peer group meeting at first, I see that with so many of our new ACE peer group members. They join the program, they have that first meeting, and they're like, I think my net profit's this. I think my financials are here. Getting clarity on those financials, which I know we'll get into, which you have full clarity on now, is just so beneficial. And I know you can expand on this to make decisions on your business, whether it's to be more profitable, to know what stream of revenue is the most profitable in your business, the best gross profit. I know that you no doubt have financial clarity now, but joining that ACE peer group program, you don't have the clarity of your financials, as you mentioned, no doubt.
So what's funny about that is when you're talking about making the decisions and whatnot, it's not just, are we doing a good job? It's so you can, so I know not everybody does open bookkeeping. You mentioned when I realized I needed to do it, but the other thing is there was almost a come to God moment where we had my production manager and my operations manager come in and they just go, what's going on? Why is it money so tight? Is it always this much? And it was because I started to open up things a little bit more, let them see behind the curtain per se. And once they saw that and I could show them all the data and show them all the information that you and I go through of, look, this is our direct labor percentage. This is how this is affecting this. When I go gross profit, this is all of our materials. This is our shop time. And when I can share that information with people, all of a sudden you think might get intimidated, or they might say, no, we can't do anything but then it actually gives them a little bit more ownership. They go, yes. Oh, and we are now breaking records in the amount of time that it takes us to complete jobs, the efficiency that we're getting through, the amount of shop time we're reducing. We're breaking records. And I'll be honest with you, I like to think it's not me. I haven't done much to do with it. It's all our production manager, our operations, because they go, how can I get this number down? And when you share that information with them, that has been literally a game changer for us.
No, I'm thinking of a specific example last week, sharing that information with one of your operations managers. Y'all were able to point out equipment rental was too high. And it was actually, we had to move something around, make sure everything was booked correctly. Without you sharing that with your team, we couldn't have made sure that everything was booked correctly. And I just love how clear you are with your team and how you're a complete open book to every single person on your team, knowing the financials as well to perform better on their jobs. That is just so crucial in the business. And I love that we're utilizing that, no doubt. And speaking on that, Noe, what numbers would you say most matter to landscape contractors? Whether you're looking at gross profit, of course, looking at snow maintenance, what would you say most matters? And I know we're going to get into that labor too, no doubt.
So I would say everything. I'd say every single line on your P&L matters. When you look at the balance sheet, that matters. We give importance to so many different things. You mentioned direct labor. I would say direct labor is such a trigger in terms of, are we being efficient? If we can reduce direct labor with the same amount of income, what difference does that make for everything else? I think does that have the trickle down effect, which is great, but there's so many things. You mentioned the rental thing, and we look at it and With my production manager, it's gross profit. He knows that he's in charge of everything above that line, right? Like everything above overhead. So
Got
he
it.
looks at it and he can go, "Hey, why is this affecting this? What is this number? I didn't think we used this much." And because he's in charge of that, then he can go through and has ownership of that.
Oh.
But then you have overhead, and you can have your office manager, or you can have an operations manager go through, and you can say, "Okay, you're in charge of this," or even honestly, it could still be me. But we say, "Okay, how can we reduce this? We need to try to maintain this for X amount of time." And so that's why I think there's nothing. I wouldn't put it on any single number. Again, probably the one with the most trickle down effect is going to be direct labor, but everything gets affected.
No, everything gets affected. You have to look at everything. You have to be clear on every single metric. And specifically, I just want to say to our ACE peer group members, we just mentioned the slide that I say to focus on the most is direct labor, but direct labor is your biggest driver of cost of goods sold for most of our companies in the ACE peer group program. If you don't have an eye on that direct labor, if you can't be efficient, still producing the same amount of revenue, then you're going to see that direct labor percentage drive up, your gross profit come down. It's going to affect the rest of your business. And we now being in our outsourcing accounting team for over a year, being in the peer groups for 2 years, what your admin and overhead expenses are every single month. They're consistent so that what revenue you need to hit to cover those expenses. If you want to expand a little bit on that, because your rent's consistent, your software as a service is always consistent.
Yeah. So for us, it helps to know that when we're growing, the percentage is going to be, right? And actually, the peer group brought a lot of clarity in terms of direct labor. Every number, but with benchmarking. But when I look at and we say, okay, direct labor is, I don't know, let's say it's 40%, just as an example.
Mm-hmm.
Is that good or is that bad? And if you have nothing to compare against, or you look at per employee or per field member, this is what the revenue is per field member. When you compare that to everybody else and you go, wow, you know what? These folks are bringing 300,000 in per employee or per field labor, and we're at like 100,000. Guess what? Something's not right. What are we doing wrong? And so you start, but it goes back to, you don't know what you don't know. You might think that every other landscape company in the world brings in, let's say 100,000 per employee. Then you go, oh, okay, I think we're doing all right. But again, if you're seeing in our peer group, it's 12 companies, right? So if we see 11 other companies and they're $200,000 higher than you, then you start realizing something's not right. So that's one of the biggest things for us. But to be able to have somebody to go to and be able to ask questions and be able to go back and forth, to me, it made a world of difference. And just, again, being able to share that information. So it's not just me, it's what do I do with that information? How do I share it across my team so that they understand?
How do you share across your team and having everyone involved? And specifically, like you said, having an employee signed to ownership on different things, whether it's equipment rental, whether it's gross profit on certain jobs in different divisions. That ownership, it makes the employee feel involved because they know what needs to be done to make money, but also what needs to be done to improve every aspect of your business. And that's a great point. I know you just mentioned transitioning into financial benchmarking and the peer groups. Those first few meetings must have been eye-opening, first few financial reports, because it was able to identify and reveal those blind spots that you weren't maybe seeing, that you didn't know your direct labor was that high, or you didn't know, oh, wow, my expenses shot up because of this reason. So can you touch on how those blind spots really came into sight almost,
Yeah. So again, when we're benchmarking and we're comparing to other folks and you say, okay, net profit is this much, and you might be able to compare across the country. And I use LMN and I'm a big proponent of LMN going in. And that's one of the things, right? So when we go in, LMN has a thing for their budget where you can say, okay, if you do this much maintenance, if you do this much snow, this is more or less what your overhead should be. This should be what your net profit is going to be, or maybe you're a little bit high in materials and whatnot. So it helps benchmark in terms of maybe nationwide, but why not benchmark against folks that are getting help, folks that expect to be one of the premium elite companies? And that's exactly what I think the peer group members are. Everybody's looking to grow. Everybody's looking to fine tune things. So we can't be benchmarking against folks that are, and I've got nothing against the truck in a truck, because that's exactly what I used to be. But if I compare my numbers to what I used to be, no, there's going to be so many different things. that I can't compare. So let's compare it with folks that are doing similar things to me, folks that are looking to grow, people that are getting help. And so when I do that, I can then say, okay, great. If I'm really low on this or I'm really high on that, again, it's finding those mistakes, and then you can focus on improving. Now, you do have to have a growth mentality. If you're always thinking like, oh, maybe their numbers are wrong or maybe this is wrong, then no. If anything, I'm always like, I get happy when I find mistakes. I get happy and excited when I'm like, okay, great. This wasn't clear to these people. How can we scale this? How can we replicate this so that I bring in a new team member and they can do the exact same thing? Like, I'll give you one quick example. I mentioned that we're breaking records in terms of our labor hours for jobs completed. My one-to-one that we just had was, okay, great. Now, what are you noting down or what are you recording so that we can replicate that if you're not around for whatever reason? So if we're doing something different, it has to be noted. So it makes it scalable.
And you just made an excellent point. Once you see the data, once you see those data in the financial reports, it's about what decisions to make after that to continuously grow and ensure that the decisions you're making, you don't want to get to the next peer group meeting, especially with your peers, and almost not improve in that category because you're being held accountable as well. And if you can explain on that as well, especially in our peer group program, but it's a great point you're making with your team and connecting them with those financial reports as well. I love it.
So one thing I have to bring up though is I used to be one of those guys that when I showed up to a peer group meeting and I had information that wasn't accurate, and it wasn't because I didn't want to provide accurate information. It's just I didn't have the best information. My accountant wasn't on top of it, and to be able to go in and be able to share that financial data with everybody else, and you see the other folks that are going through the same thing, even in our own peer group. I will say this: I was was in a text thread yesterday about like them finally moving things forward because they're getting that information. And when you see how much of an impact it's made for you, you just know how impactful it's going to be for them. And for us, it's just all of that. There's so much information that you take from it. Again, we talked about snow. Is that division even profitable for us? One of the best examples I can think of, lawn care. Lawn care, everybody loves lawn care, right? Like the fertilization and weed control. You look back on it now that we have our numbers, is it really profitable for us? Our routes aren't as tight. We haven't focused on it super heavily, so it's not profitable for us. I think you talk to any landscaper about not being profitable in lawn care, you'd be like, what's wrong with you? But it's, again, if you have the information, now you can look at it and be like, okay, great. That's just what the numbers show us.
And specifically, you made a great point about your routes, about the specific breakdown of your business, where you're located. So many factors go into, am I profitable in this division? If you don't have, again, I'm coming back to the clarity on it. If you're not separating out by classes in your QuickBooks file, you don't know gross profit on each class, on each specific job, then you can't make those decisions to be a more profitable company, to come away from the peer group, whether it's the financial reports or the monthly reviews with your bookkeeper, come away and say, okay, these are the decisions I need to make to improve my business. And Noe, that transitions us right into, I'm thinking of our recent monthly review for the month of February. For our outsourcing and accounting team, those that don't know, we do a monthly review for all of our outsourcing accounting clients. And we just had Noe and Avanza's best month ever in the month of February. Noe, I'm just thinking about what changed and what became more accurate, because February 2025 compared to February 2026 was completely, it was a completely different story. And of course, Snow will tell that story, but it's also, and I know you can expand on this, looking at that year over year data was so beneficial for you and your team, no doubt.
Yeah. So when we started out with you guys, it was January of 2025. So February was only the second month, and
Exactly.
we're going off of a year where being able to pull P&Ls for the previous year, right? We didn't have that for 2024, and it's, how do we not have that information? So how can I make decisions based on information that is a year old? So we have to, February, we go, okay, great. We're knocking jobs out. We're getting all that. We're starting spring cleanups for commercial properties. But we got to the end of February and we're like, okay, money seems like it's getting tight. What's going on? And it just made a world of difference not having that information on hand. You guys are doing what you can, but again, it's all backdated information that we were using. So we started from scratch for the most part.
Exactly.
And now we had a year of data that we could mess with, that we could say, okay, we could analyze, I guess, probably not mess with, but that we could analyze. And so going through it and saying, okay, great, our direct labor for this was this much. And we also had our forecast. I don't think you mentioned that. So you guys were able to help us forecast for this year. So we're able to say, okay, we generally spend this much on labor for February. How did we compare to February of last year? We were low on hours. We controlled overtime a little bit more. We were able to look at our shop time and whatnot, and even routing, right? So it made a world of difference because of that. And then again, seeing Snow, see that it's a profitable service and that we are a little bit more of a Snow company than I thought. Great. Now let's double down on it. And that's exactly what we did this year is we saw that it was profitable. So we focused on it a little bit more and brought up more revenue.
100% brought up more revenue. And also, Noe, I'm just thinking back to our review call. Steve, our vice president of financial services, leads those review calls. And we were able to catch some of the income booked in February. We were able to accrue to the rest of the year. And it's so important to know booking the revenue in the correct months. That also gives your team clarity. This is when the work was performed. This is when, if we were paid a month later for that invoice, it's so important to accrue that revenue to the correct month so you can stay consistent on labor matches when work was performed month over month. Specifically watching those overtime hours, though, that was a great point. I just saw so much improvement, not only on your gross profit, but specifically Snow, just keeping an eye on those labor hours. Still had some overtime, but no, it was almost good overtime for your team as well. It was almost efficient overtime so that payroll wasn't killing our cash flow every month, but every week to week, but you were still able to have great overtime and keeping your team happy because they know they're producing for the company. We know we're in a good spot now.
Yeah. And I'd say one thing is that if you're able to become more profitable, there's things that you can do for them so that they feel it, right? We don't want to just improve profitability and say, great, my take home is larger. But what about theirs? So when we look at that, and so we can offer more benefits, and ultimately, because if they've got to feel something, if they're producing better and more efficiently, what are they getting out of it? You can explain to them that it's like, this is how we're going to live. This is what we can make out of it. This is how I get to give back to you guys. I can't give you anything extra. There's nothing left over.
It's an excellent point, Noe. And you as a landscape owner, as owner of that business, you're providing for all your employees almost. And I want to say, I don't want to say this, but you feel responsible almost as well with the paycheck. It's just, I can't imagine that as a responsibility as a landscape owner. And to see the February that y'all had moving into 2026, you have to feel just grateful that you're able to provide back for employees. Most employees, you have a very low turnover, employees that have been with your company for years on end. And I only came in January 2025, but most of those employees have been with you longer as well, correct?
Yeah. We've even had a couple that have maybe left because the grass is greener on the other side. And they come back, and I think it feels good. And it's I talked with my production manager about this yesterday. It feels good that we're building something that people want to stay with, that people really love, that they appreciate. I'm grateful for it, but it's, again, the opportunities that come through our work.
No doubt. The opportunities that come in, that's a great point. And Noe, before we transition to the budgeting and forecasting that we really focused on this year, what advice would you give to landscape owners that only look at numbers once a year, that really as well don't share those numbers with their teams? And I'm sure, as we talked about earlier, that's where you were to start off the business. Without clarity of your financials, you weren't sharing that clarity with your team. You were looking at your bank account to ensure payroll could be run, material costs could be covered. So what advice would you give to owners that are just looking at once a year, that aren't reviewing their finances month over month? No, you're viewing that P&L every day now. And I love it. And that's how we're able to stay in contact, especially the past 2 months entering 26. Just you're able to make decisions based off that accurate data.
Yeah. It's finding efficiencies. It's, if you don't have the information, then you can't make decisions.
Yes.
It's almost where you get frozen or struck, where for us, it was, can I afford to buy another truck? Can I afford, does another, and it's just a different mentality, right? So there used to be a point where we would say, okay, we get another truck and it's an extra payment a month. We go, but what if we split the guys and we reduce hours from 4 guys per truck to 2 guys per truck? Are they going to spend, instead of it being 10-man hours, now it's all of a sudden 8-man hours? So you
Yeah.
just become more efficient that way. And you look at what gives you the most returns. So you start, like you said, getting clarity on everything. And so you can share that information with others. Again, I think the responsibility of ownership is huge. But for me, if you're looking at it once a year, you're going to expect some growth, but you don't know what to expect, and it's all gut feelings, and there's no data behind it. And that there was it was very short time ago, but that I was there, but there's not really any real information that you can take from it. It's all, you know what? Probably the biggest thing I would say is we as a business owner, you'll see on LinkedIn and everything, we always talk about grinding and working hard and outworking everybody else. But that can only take you so far. When
Yes.
you have the right data and the right information, you can say, okay, what are things that I can maybe take off of my plate? What are things that I can share with others so that they can do this? So that I don't want to jinx it, but I'm working maybe 20 to 30 hours a week. But that's because once I started sharing that information with other people and saying, giving them the ownership, which I keep going back to that, right? The ownership thing.
Love it.
But it's because make them responsible for it. But how can I make them responsible for it if I don't have the information? Again, giving them that piece of that statement of that P&L and saying, this is your portion. You're in charge of it. Guess what? Now that all of a sudden that overhead, or no, sorry, gross profit, that includes hiring, that includes how many people you're going to need. Do you need more staff? Do you need to maybe let some people go? Luckily, we haven't had to do that, but all of that goes back to that statement, and they're in charge of it. I have to trust them, and what their goal is, it has to be above a certain gross profit. Are you doing your job? Are you going above and beyond, or do we need to work on something? If we don't have that information, I can't trust other people. And there's a lot of people that want to, again, as a smaller company, the owner's doing so many different things. And we say, oh, well, you can't grow unless you give other people responsibility and tasks to do. But you can't, how can you determine whether they're doing a good job or not if you don't have that information every day?
No, you hit it right, the nail on the head. Having that financial data, you can't give ownership to your team and then take some of the responsibility off of your back. That is an excellent point. Clear financial data, the clarity of your financials, knowing profitability of every job, knowing profitability of different classes in your business. It's how you can assign ownership then to your managers, to your operation team, so that if something is off, if you're not hitting a certain percentage, you go to them, ownership of that specific job or gross profit, and you can easily ask them, hey, how can I help you do your job better? How can I help you improve on this section of the business? And it's easier to identify those problems almost because you have the financial data. I love what you said there. That's excellent. That's excellent.
You did also mention the budgeting. With the budgeting,
Yes.
that's one of the things, we start being able to set it by division. So we could say, this is how much we expect to make from this year. This is how much we expect that these groups to make, or whatever. One of my things is now knowing that we've got an average overhead cost, right? And we know what that is. So we can then set our goals. It's just, again, ownership, right? So we said, this is your goal for producing the work. What about selling the work? Now we have goals. We say, hey, we have to sell this much so that we can cover these costs. We can now set goals because we have a budget. Before, I had no idea what my overhead was. And so if we had a month that was $100,000, again, I keep using simple numbers, $100,000, great. Did I make money on that? Because I had to pay the guys. What was my overhead? Did that cover the cost? But now I can say, okay, now we produce this much. We have a goal of 200,000. That way it covers overhead. That way it gives ability to have some net profit. It's not arbitrary numbers. It's literally numbers that are based on data.
Based on data. And Noe, you made a great point. Not knowing those fixed expenses beforehand, those expenses month over month, even if you're not producing the revenue, I say this all the time in my ACE peer group meetings: rent, utility costs, your admin salaries, those are going to stay consistent every single month. You need to know what that number is. You need to know what you produce so that you can make a net profit on that. That is an excellent point. I love it. And transitioning right into it, you've been talking budgets a lot. Finally having that year of 2025, we were able to budget for 2026 and truly forecast. I'm thinking of Logan Roffey, one of our team members. He's excellent. And we all met together. He built a great forecast and budget for you. How are you able to budget and forecast with more confidence now, especially with that 2025 year of data? It's compared to 23, 24, not knowing, am I going to hit this amount in revenue, because you weren't aware of those expenses month over month as well.
Yeah. So it's helpful for me to be able to say, this is our goal, right? I'm a sports guy. I played soccer all my life, and if you know what your goal is, then you can find ways to try to get to it. But if you don't know what your goal is, and you say, okay, again, throwing out random numbers, I could say our goal is $5 million this year. Okay, but what information do I have to back it?
Yes.
Are we going to sell this much, or do I need a business developer? Does that cover that? One of the helpful things for me was when I spent time with Steve and we started talking about our forecast, and he goes, great, tell me, what do you expect to buy any trucks? Do you expect to hire anybody? Do you expect, and you go through all these expectations, and these are things that we don't think about a year out. These are things that we go, I had a perfect example at Grow was one of the guys was telling me they were selling the truck bodies, and he goes, when you buy a truck, he goes, 4 months, it does take a couple of months or whatever, you order it. And I go, I think when I buy trucks, I just reach out to a dealership and say, I need a truck, and turn around and they're like, do you realize you also pay more money if you don't plan that out? I was like, I didn't until this year. And the reason why I planned it out was because I worked out the forecast with you guys. If we're going to be doing this and we know what our revenue per vehicle is, per asset, right? Then we can start saying, okay, if we want to hit this, we're probably going to need 2 more trucks. And so and that trickle down effect. So I go, okay, a truck's not going to drive itself. So that's probably going to mean we're going to need 2 guys per truck, or 3 guys, whatever that crew is. So we started throwing out the forecasting and started being, okay, great, we're going to do this. So I was able to think about that, but because of the questions that Steve asked. So, okay, what is our plan for this year? And so then again, you start working out tactics. It's again, back to soccer. Say, okay, if I run this way, I'm just going to go this way. But same thing with this. If I bring on somebody else, you know what? I can only sell this much per year. So now we just hired a business developer. Why? Because we knew that's something that we needed based on the forecast, based on the information that we were going to try to outsell last year. And I can only produce so much. It actually, even our operations manager, Melody, she's now working almost as an account manager.
A rock star. Sorry to interrupt.
Yeah. No, she's a rock star. But knowing that, hey, we have to produce more, we have to sell more, because we, again, looking at direct labor, there's a couple of months, and I hope this helps somebody else out. There's a couple of months when it's slow periods in the season. We go, okay, what kind of busy work can we find them? Hey, come do work in my house. Hey, come do work around the shop. We're trying to give them hours because we're trying to give back to them. But what if we had so much work that they're just busy all year round with stuff where, guess what? My house is the last one to get done, or it's a small percentage of what gets done, right? So but that we were able to do that because we then knew direct labor. But now we said, okay, now we just have to sell so much more so that they're busy.
Yes.
So we're able to focus other people's responsibilities and say, okay, one, we need the business developer. That's all sales. And then our operations manager, Melody, hey, I need you to help out with selling a little bit more. And because she is a rock star, she's able to do it. I won't say that'll work for just anybody, but for us, it works really well.
No, I'll say if everyone had a Melody on their team, I think everyone would start to be more profitable in the peer groups, no doubt. Shout out to you.
That's true.
You hit some great points, just really forecasting and budgeting, how it changes the way you thought about your growth, purchasing that vehicle, as you said, and thinking about it at growth. You need to plan for that 2-3 months ahead, a year out even. You need to know your revenue per vehicle. You need to know the efficiency of your labor crews. So you know, okay, if I'm going to add a crew, if I'm going to replace a vehicle, I can afford that, because that's going to add on, to your point, Noe, to your indirect expenses, that principal cost, if you do add that on as a loan. Being aware, Noe, of your indirect expenses going up, what revenue month over month you need to hit to cover those expenses, that is excellent points you made across the business, no doubt, especially specific to Avanza. I love to hear it.
Thank you.
What advice would you give owners, Noe, who, again, I know we touched on this, but almost avoid looking at their numbers? Again, no one goes into the landscaping industry, mowing lawns, plowing snow to be aware of their financials. You do it to make the world a better place, to make it look beautiful. What would you give a habit maybe you formed, a financial habit that you've really taken ownership of? Specifically this year, Noe, I've seen the shift in your team. What habit would you say is beneficial, would you say, to people that need to know and be better clear on their financials?
You know what? I'd say if you could, the biggest thing that I hear from everybody is cash flow, right? So
Yep.
I'd say cash flow is probably one of the, if you want, let's say you want to work and you want to be the one out mulching, you want to be out doing the edging and cutting grass and whatnot. I understand. I love that. It's probably the biggest thing that I miss. Somebody on my team told me recently when I introduce myself to folks, I don't tell them I'm a business owner. I tell them I cut grass. But that's the thing, is I loved it. And a lot of people, they want to be doing that stuff. So I understand. But if you want to go mulch a job and you want to maybe install a patio, cash flow is really big, because then you have to start wondering, where am I going to buy the pavers from? Where am I going to be able to buy the mulch from? If you want to get the mulch in bulk so you can still do that, it's going to make a big difference for you in terms of how are you affording it. There was plenty of times when cash flow was really tight for me that I was using personal credit cards left and right because I had no other option.
Yes.
Now that we can look at things and we can say, this is our cash flow statement. We're expecting this much money to come in. This is what's going out. So we know, okay, great. Cash flow has gotten a lot better. And again, you just make decisions that will affect that. So we did a lot of prepays and we did some big prepays, which is why you were talking about the accrual thing. And so being able to offer that, because you see that's something that greatly affects you. And one of my things, again, back to the peer group, was the very first time I was in the peer group at Discovery in New Orleans. Coming back on the bus, I was talking with somebody and he's got a $20 million landscaping company. And the fact that he still talked about having cash flow issues in spring, you're like, wait, what? You have these kinds of issues too? It's really eye-opening. And so then I would say cash flow, if you can work on financials so that you can create a cash flow statement, but you can't do that if you don't have your financials in order.
You can't do that if you don't have your financials in order. No, that's an excellent point. And also, I see, to your point, Noe, $10, $20 million companies in our ACE peer group program, 8 to 10, 12% net profit at times. But we go to that current ratio slide and their cash is very depleted. Their cash, they're looking to cover payroll week over week. And you're really circling around this theme, having clear financial data, Noe, that's how you're able to forecast and also plan ahead for cash flow, but plan ahead so that you're not growing at too much of a rapid pace. Growing is great, but you're not growing too fast. If you want to expand on that a little bit.
Yeah, that one hit hard. And it's because, for context, and I don't know if Ian remembers, when we talked last year, I think it was in the middle of the year, and I go, you know what, maybe bring a business developer, and that way we can hit $5 million in 2026. And I think we hit 2 million last year, right? So we hit 2 million to try to go to 5 million. And he just go, that's not normal growth. And I will say that we had a pretty good growth. We started out in the peer group at 1 million, then hit 1.5, then 2. So it's been pretty consistent in that sense. But I was like, if we bring a business developer, we can produce so much more. But the truth is, that's where you start seeing cash flow issues, and you start saying, okay, then where am I going to pull that money in to be able to pay for that truck, to be able to buy that, to be able to afford a crew? So now, once we saw the data and we start seeing, okay, this is actually what we're going to be able to do. Great. Now our goal for this year is $3 million, right? So we can aim for that based on the information that we have. But that, okay, cash flow is going to be tight again if we're trying to hit that growth.
Yes.
But you go into it knowing, and you know why, right? But if you're just saying, I want to hit this, or those arbitrary numbers, you have to know why. If you have no information to back it up, but again, we didn't know that. And I didn't see how tough that was until we were probably mid-season and having all that data, going through these numbers with you guys. You know what? 5 million might not be as realistic as I thought. And then once we started doing the forecasting and really seeing things, it was, yeah, okay, 3 is going to be our number. If we go above it, great. But 3 is where we probably are.
In bite-sized pieces, but being aware of that, as you said, that's excellent to hear, Noe. I have 3 great takeaways I got from you from this Roots of Success. You don't know what you don't know. You mentioned that multiple times, but if you don't have accurate financial data, if you don't have the info, you can't make accurate decisions on your business. And that's where you see cash flow hit. That's where you see tough times in your business. Benchmarking against your peers, Noe, you were blind to things that time until you were able to see, compared to your ACE peer group members, where you were hurting, where maybe you need to specifically improve on, bring back to your team and work on, which I know you have done an excellent job of. Every single peer group meeting, you're bringing back those values to your team. And I'm not talking y'all 10, 20 things. I'm talking the bite-sized pieces, the 1 to 2 to 3 things that you can truly bring back. And Noe, this really brings it all together. The forecasting and budgeting, that's how you are able to assign ownership to your team members. And I think ACE peer group members or Roots of Success listeners, they can take great advice from you. Assigning ownership to your team members is how they feel fully involved in, I'm helping produce for my company, and they feel true ownership as well in the company, Noe. Is there anything else you'd like to say to our Roots of Success listeners before we close out?
No, I appreciate the time.
Yes.
You hit the nail on the head with the ownership piece, because it's probably the biggest thing. We had a site visit. Everybody thought it was culture, but it's also like it's giving opportunities to grow, but they have to know why and how. And so then I think being able to share that with them has been critical for us. So thank you.
Thank you, Noe. I appreciate seeing you grow and continuing to grow with you. It's a true pleasure with you and your team. You have rock stars on your team, and I can't wait to see where we go next with Avanza Landscaping.
Thanks, Ian.
Thank you, Noe. Glad to be here.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Roots of Success, brought to you by the subject matter experts at McFarland Stanford. Have a question you want our coaches to tackle in a future episode? You could submit that at mcfarlandstanford.com/podcast. And to find more helpful content from McFarland Stanford, follow us on X, LinkedIn, Instagram, and Facebook. If this or any of our episodes have piqued your interest in ACE peer groups, we encourage you to join us at ACE Discovery. Just check out the events tab at mcfarlandstanford.com. This is Jason Noe, co-founder and principal at McFarland Stanford. We'll see you next time.